say, let's get back to the hotel right away and see what we can find on television. We got back and tuned in CNN, and of course it was full of the event. And just as we got there, we saw, I assume, a replay of the second airplane hitting the South Tower while the North was aflame and smoking. And of course, we stayed tuned to CNN for the next 5 days until we could get a plane back to the States. We got the first plane out of Italy on the following Sunday to return home. I think I suffered the same reaction as every American and perhaps every civilized person in this world. A terrible shock and disbelief that this thing could happen and that it could be plotted by so-called human beings.
It has caused, of course, incredible changes in all our lives and American lives and the world geopolitical agendas. But I wonder, what do you think are the new change ground rules of American television? You've been dealing in a long and thoughtful way with the whole issue of censorship in wartime and how you balance that with the requisite press freedoms. Tell us your thoughts on this momentous issue at this time.
Well, Steve, I wouldn't have thought that there was going to be a sea change in how we practice journalism until I read a couple of days ago that the traditional networks had agreed, and indeed the cable news networks, had agreed with a request by the government that it not carry Bin Laden's propaganda broadcasts in this country. I don't know who's being protected in that case. The other networks for the other countries in the world are not observing similar blackouts of his information.
Surely the great BBC is not.
The BBC is not, nor is the Arab Islamic networks or the other networks in the other countries. As far as I know, I've never heard that any of them are observing any such blackout. So only the American people are being denied what it is that he is propagandizing at the moment. I can understand to some degree the concern about coded messages, but as I've been reading, most of the intelligence experts
think that's highly unlikely.
Highly unlikely that it would be so. And if so, it would represent certainly a much more deeply organized plot around the world than we had ever imagined was possible, even in the test of our imagination in the World Trade bombings themselves. I don't quite understand it, and I don't quite understand why the networks here at home should have acceded to that.
You think it was a mistake?
I do think it was a mistake, unless there's something we just haven't been told. Otherwise, it's protecting the American people from the enemy's propaganda. It seems we should know as much as possible about the enemy's propaganda, what the rest of the world is hearing from Bin Laden, that we should not be shut off from this information. It seems important to me that we should have it. And the other thing that disturbs me is the probability, from what we've heard, that the military is not going to entertain the idea of reporters and cameramen accompanying our military forces in action. They did this in the Persian Gulf War to a denial of our history. We have no independent history of what happened in the front lines of the forces that invaded Iraq. The military organized pool coverage and assigned pool reporters and then did not take them along. We were blacked out. The only history we have, the only photographs we have, the only film we have was that shot by the Army Pictorial Service or reported by Army public relations officers. That's scarcely an impartial report, and that's all the history we have. We not only don't have a history of anything that went wrong with our forces, and we should be entitled to that, but we don't even have a history of the heroism. That's not reported either, as far as we know. I'm hoping that the military grows a little wiser in this case and will tolerate, and not only tolerate, but welcome correspondence with the forces in action. That does not mean that they're entitled to send their dispatches to use satellite to cover the battlefield live. That's impossible. There must be military secrecy, military security, and the press must recognize that and respond to it. We worked perfectly well in World War II, perfectly well. In the European theater, the correspondents could go anywhere they wished to go, and the military helped us get there. But all of our material had to be submitted through a very well-organized censorship. And while the military censors commanded the battlefield, the material eventually got back to military censors, but men who were drafted from the legal profession usually, and recognized the public's right to know, and not only their right to know, but their duty to know, and passed material that they felt the military was withholding only for their own political reasons, not for military secrecy. And all of the dispatches were eventually released. If a day later or 2 days later or a week or a month later, they were finally released when the military secrecy was no longer necessary.
One of the things that has just recently come to my attention was what I thought a remarkable statement of yours in reference to something that happened immediately after the September 11th attacks, which were the comments by Jerry Falwell and Pat Robertson. And I have not seen, it was published in TV Guide. I haven't yet had a chance to see it, but tell us what you said in that article, or what you feel about it.
Well, I said it in making one of the 2 speeches I was scheduled to make in Italy, and that came just a day after the Falwell-Robertson statement. And I said I found it incredible, indeed, incredibly insulting to many Christians in this country, most of the Christians in this country. Most of the Christians do not belong to the far-right conservative elements to which Falwell and Robertson appeal. But for them to suggest that those who belonged to the American Civil Liberties Union, who belonged to other liberal organizations.
People for the American Way.
People for the American Way, for heaven's sakes. Tens of thousands of people who belonged to those organizations were somehow guilty of creating this situation.
Licentious television was one of the evils that they were talking about.
Can you imagine that? And I said I just did not know that Falwell and Robertson worshiped the same God as Bin Laden worshiped.
They later apologized, but in that situation, apology seems to me to make it even more grotesque.
We have to accept apologies, I suppose, but we don't have to accept them intellectually. And intellectually, what we found out was that this was what Falwell and Robertson harbor in their hearts, is that kind of an attitude toward the liberals in this country. Those who would protect our civil liberties, protect our right to worship as we please.